Welcome back, everyone, to another one-on-one with Jerry Hall. Today's conversation is with Mr. Mark Yusko. That's right, Morgan Creek Capital is in the house. Now, keep in mind, this conversation was recorded several months ago. However, the content is timeless. We're not talking about necessarily current events. We talk about principles. We talk about how to view and look at circumstances, value assessment. Mark is an incredibly gifted, articulate communicator. It comes across in this interview. Now, for those of you in the crypto space, we're going to touch on this XRP topic. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed having it. Let's get right to it. So Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
No, Jerry, great to be with you. Look forward to the conversation.
You know, I'll tell you, I was thinking, preparing for this interview, as much as I really enjoy the way you speak and a lot of the content that you talk about, there are a lot of like contextual things underneath, and that's kind of the basis for some of my questions. So right. If I were to get to my first question, I'll just get right to it.
Yeah.
Long after you've passed, what would be the 3 qualities that you would like to be remembered for?
Oh, wow. What a fantastic question. So I think, first and foremost, to me, it's the most important thing in the world is integrity, right? I think, if you don't have integrity in anything you do, whether it's, being authentic in yourself or whether it's in business dealings or anything, I think integrity is really, really important. So that's certainly one. I think the second would be resilient, right? Ooh. I think, part of our culture today, this participation trophy culture, we don't allow failure. We don't encourage failure. We don't encourage risk taking. And I've failed a bunch, and I'm not, embarrassed by it. I actually have a little sticker on my desk by my computer, and it says, from Seneca the Younger, that failure changes for the better, success for the worse. And I think I'm better for every failure that I've endured and come back from. So I think resilience is number 2. And then I would say maybe competitive would maybe be there, but I'm going to push that off to number 4. And I would say curious. I have always been curious about new ideas, about, new ways of thinking, about kind of going back and discovering old ways of thinking. Because I would say there's nothing new in this world, right? Take every self-help and leadership book from today. You can go back to the Greeks and Romans 2,600 years ago and find all the same quotes. So maybe those 3.
Very good. Interesting that you say integrity. I'm a big fan and a big believer. I had this exchange once, and I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
This person said to me that you have no integrity.
Oh, wow.
And I thought to myself, wow. I said, how are you defining integrity? Yeah. And they went into this litany of how they described their value system and measured my response and my actions and my behaviors to their value system. And I thought to myself, okay, that's pretty interesting. I'll tell you how I have always defined integrity. And this was a client, or it was soon to be a potential client. And it was really weird how this all went down. But I said to them, listen, what I've learned is that for me to be in integrity, I have to follow my own value system. And if my value system doesn't align with yours, it doesn't mean I don't have any integrity. It means I'm not in line with your value system.
Right.
And the temperament and the context change from being kind of hostile and confrontational to, and I have to give that person credit. They had an open mind. They listened, and we were able to walk.
That open mind point is really important, Jerry. And I love that story because, one of the things that we have to deal with today, as individuals and communities and societies, is kind of the breaking down of barriers and borders. And we live in a truly global village today. And one of the big dangers is taking your belief system and applying it to other places. And, I talk about this I rail all the time, 100 years ago, America, the US, was an emerging market run by a gang, actually two gangs, the Irish and the Italians. And we were a debtor country. We were a basket case, right? You couldn't even walk down the street from 1860 to 1910 and really feel safe. And yet today, we want to see that, we're this advanced economy, this, very, wealthy economy. And we expect everyone who's developing like we were 100 years ago to look and act just like us. That's just silly. And so we project today's America on other places like China or others. And that's silly, right? If you projected America 100 years ago, maybe that's equivalent, or 50 years ago. But this having your own belief system be the only belief system or value system is crazy.
I believe so. In this, like, kind of takes me to like another question, because although I believe, honestly, in this, I'm being 100% honest, I believe you were born with a natural set of gifts. However, the man you are today, I do not think was a genetic lottery win. I think that it was influenced. And I'm curious, I say this because I'm curious, throw out throughout your life a few of the mentors that you've had that you've learned some of these qualities from.
Look, man, I'm loving this conversation and on so many levels. And again, the insight there is so incredible that, we're all born lucky, right? If you get the genetic lottery ticket to be born in a wealthy, developed country, that's fantastic. But not everybody uses that gift in the same way.
Right.
And in fact, I live by, the biblical verse, right? To that which much is given, much is expected. And to your point, I am who I am for two things. One, I call it the series of happy accidents, and we can talk about any of those at some point. Someone else said, no, that's really divine intervention. You're being steered to your right path, kind of like The Alchemist with Paulo Coelho. But to your point, mentorship is so important. And I can think back to so many things, whether it's an early coaching experience when I was a young thought athlete, never was much of an athlete, but thought I was an athlete. There were some great lessons from early coaches. My second grade teacher, right, to this day, Miss Komaroff, I have this unnatural affinity and affection. I shouldn't say unnatural, but undying affinity and affection for the things that she unlocked in me in terms of creativity and curiosity and a feeling that you could do more and be more. And the character Miss Frizzle in Magic School Bus, I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's a kid's show, big fluffy orange hair and kind of crazy personality. That was Miss Komaroff, and she really inspired me. Then you fast forward to she wasn't a mentor, but she unlocked for me something that I never thought about, which was I didn't grow up in a college family. My dad went to a 2-year school before it was really a university. He worked hard and was a foreman for a company called AMF, and then went back to school at 29. My mom dropped out to get married, and wonderful person, but not a college person. So I didn't grow up knowing that I was going to go to college. Didn't know what Goldman Sachs was or McKinsey. And this woman, I think amazingly named Faith Diamond, who was my guidance counselor, gave me a list of college and said, hey, you should go to college. You get good grades, you got good scores. And she just, she helped me go down that path. Fast forward again, my first chairman of when I took over as the chief investment officer at University of North Carolina had a single great line. And we had a love-hate relationship, perhaps. We had a very mercurial relationship, many ways good, some other ways less good, but he had one line that I'll never forget, and it's impacted me in a lot of ways, and I use it in this whole construct of mentorship. And he said, your 20s are for getting educated, Your 30s are for building your reputation. Your 40s are for capitalizing on your reputation. Your 50s and 60s are for enjoying your reputation. And if you really think about that, education doesn't mean just going to school. It means learning what you're good at, learning what your strengths are, learning what your weaknesses are, learning what you have passion for. And maybe you can do that faster than your 20s. Some people do. But most people, I think, a decade is probably a good period. And then kind of building your reputation, going out and finding, again, a great mentor to help teach you. And that's where I just lucked out. I hit the mother lode. Julian Robertson, famous hedge fund manager at Tiger, was a principal at the university, on the board, was one of our largest investments at the endowment. And for whatever reason, he kind of took me under his wing and became a mentor. And, the fact that, I wasn't under his wing every day, like some of the great hedge fund guys who've spun out, the Tiger Cubs, as they're called. But I got to see him probably monthly. I got to talk to him pretty frequently. And when I decided to leave 7 years later, I got this email, like the movie about the Chicago Black Sox. It said, "Say it ain't so, Julian." I joke, I don't get a lot of emails from billionaires, right? That was my first one at the time. And I really thought I was going to get my Nike shoe deal, right? When you work for a public university, you don't get paid a lot. You get a lot of psychic income, helping do good for people, endowment foundation participants, students and professors. And I thought, I was going to go up and like the coach at a big university doesn't make a lot from the school, but they have a Nike shoe deal. They have their TV and radio contract. They make a lot of money other ways. And I thought he was going to say, "Mark, don't leave. We can figure out a way to pay you more." Instead, he came out, put his arm around me and said, "Mark, I'm surprised you lasted that long. I like you. I want to work together." I'm like, wow, okay, I'll hit that bid. And so I got this huge privilege over the next decade as we built Morgan Creek to have him as my mentor and guidepost. And he's the one that really taught me about integrity. I'll give you one quick story. So Julian is the only man I know who one time he went through customs wearing a pair of shoes, forgot to declare it, and sent them a check the next day, right? Most people try to hide what they're getting through customs. Here's a guy that said, "Hey, I wore a pair of shoes. I didn't declare it. Here's some money." So integrity first. And I learned so much from that mentor-mentee relationship. And then one last thing on mentorship that I think is really important. You don't actually have to have a physical relationship. You can be mentored. And I steal this from John Wooden. He wrote about this, that anyone that you read deeply about, their biography, their writings, can mentor you. And when I talk to young people, I talk about that all the time, is find people that you admire and read about them and learn from them. And then if you want to meet them and build a relationship, try. Because all they can do is say no. Exactly. Long answer, sorry.
No, it's perfect. And it's actually right on cue. There has been, I got into this crypto digital asset investing world back in February of 2018.
Yep.
Jumped into the rabbit hole of learning and trying to understand the technology. What are these purposes and use cases? What are the actual specifics? What are the dynamics and environments that they're going to be working in? Which just seems to open, every time you open a door, you have a new rabbit hole. So I'm learning about finance, learning about global trade, learning about the macro view of economics, learning about modern monetary theory and modern monetary policy. And you start learning about the history of money and the actual dynamics of fashion.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, I say all the time, it's not a tubular rabbit hole. It's an inverted funnel. And it just keeps getting wider and wider and wider on the bottom.
And that's how it's been for me. And along that journey, right? Along that journey, I guess that was a long-winded way to say that you have been a surrogate mentor for me. I'll never forget this. I'm scanning for data. I've been reading articles. Now it's time to look for some stuff on YouTube. And there was this little 10-minute, maybe 11, 12-minute interview type of thing. Yep. You and Anthony Pompliano were standing at a table, and there's a TD Ameritrade guy, maybe 26, 27-year-old guy, looks like, he was kind of he wasn't grooming to be a journalist because he didn't present himself that way.
Yeah, the man bun. He was funky. He was
So
awesome.
you remember this. You remember this.
Oh, yeah.
I watched that video. I just stop it at the end, digest for a minute. I went back and rewatched it again. I rewatched it again, copied, went to Twitter. I said, hey, guys, I don't know if you guys have been made aware of this or not, but I just watched a 10-minute masterclass on investing principles, and it was free.
That's
Check
awesome.
it out. It got a ton of responses from people on YouTube. Preparing, so fast forward a year plus later, I'm preparing for this interview. I want to go back to that because there was a blurb or two I wanted to pull out to talk to you about. That video is nowhere to be found.
Really?
It's not on TD Ameritrade's stuff. It's not on the TD network.
Yeah.
I can't find it.
All right. I will find it because I can go back into my calendar because I remember exactly what you're talking about. I'll go back in my calendar, and I think that was at a coin list or coin market.
It was a conference of some sort. Exactly. You were pulled off to the side.
I'll find it and I'll send it to you. But
it's phenomenal.
No, I appreciate that, and I remember it like it was yesterday because it was one of the first times Pomp and I did it live together. Now we followed it up with a 2.5 hour, probably way too long, on his podcast, but that was a lot of fun, and that interviewer was great in that. I mean, I tease about the man bun, but he really understood what we should be talking about, how we should be talking about it. And I agree with you. It was a great 10, 11 minutes.
It was incredible. And I've followed you ever since. And I will tell you, yesterday I had the good fortune of interviewing Raul Powell from Real Vision. And I'm a huge fan of his. His site contains a tremendous amount of Mark Yusko content. And you did an hour on value investing, and I just was kind of doing this. I want to study at the feet of people like this, and so that's when I reached out to you, and I'm so glad that you graciously accepted to do this. It's with that in mind. I want to get myself around.
I'm grateful you found it. I'm grateful that you reached out, and look, I really appreciate when someone doing the pod like this, the interviewer, prepares and has really thoughtful and insightful questions. And I'm fine shooting off the hip too. I mean, I do that all the time, but I really enjoy these types of conversations. So that means a lot. And I'm grateful for that.
Well, you're welcome. Now, before I segue into my next thing, I just want to give you credit. Between you and Raul and a couple other people, you've inspired me to take action. Now, I do not have your experience. However, I'm crafty and creative, and I am developing with a few of my friends, believe it or not, from Twitter, a financial literacy platform so that people can get up to speed so that when they watch something that you do, they're getting it. They understand what you're saying.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like a stepping stone to understand how banking works, how value is exchanged, the history of money, things of that nature, how a bond works, what's an equity, what's a derivative, these type of things.
Yep. So necessary.
You guys inspired that. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. Look, and look, Raul's a good friend. I was with him 10 days ago for his birthday. I happened to be in Cayman speaking at a conference, and he lives down there, and so we went out for his birthday, and I posted a picture of they brought us a little mini cake for his birthday, and someone was giving us grief that he really went all out. And we said we're both keto, so we didn't really want a big cake, but he's one of a kind, one of the most talented macro thinkers I've met in my career, and he's just a really good guy. The only thing I hate hanging out with people who are so good looking because it just makes me look so average,
Well, this show right here is perfect for you then.
I don't know. You look pretty good to me, Jerry.
Thank you, my friend. So, Mark, This is a question that has perplexed me for a year plus,
Got it.
and that is this. There are some of the absolute brightest, most successful, wealthiest investors on the planet diving into this space. A lot of them are actually invested in Ripple, the company, but
Yeah.
nobody will talk about Ripple, and they won't talk about XRP, the token. And I'm curious why. Do you have a spin
Yeah,
on that?
there's lots of different reasons. I mean, uh, anytime you have a phenomenon, I'll call it a phenomenon like Ripple. And what I mean by that is something that went from basically nothing, standing start, to something really, really big. There are going to be people, I'll call them the haters, right? They're going to be the haters that just hate because it was successful, and they're not, or they weren't. They didn't think of it first. So you're going to have the haters, and I discount haters by and large. It's one of my mantras on Twitter is block early and often, because if you're not civil and you're not open-minded, I just got no time. So I think that's part of it. So there can be some that just don't get involved because they're just jealous, right? Second is I think there's legitimate concerns by some, and I would put us in this category, about concentration of ownership. And we run something called the Digital Asset Index Fund with Bitwise, and it's basically trying to become the S&P 500 of crypto. And what does that mean? Well, 85% of the market cap of crypto. And there are two criteria. So one is you have to have a certain liquidity profile and third-party custody. And the second is you can't be closely held. So we have 10 of the top 12. We exclude Stellar and XRP because those are too closely held by the foundations. And it's the reason that Tesla is not in the S&P 500. It's not because it's not successful. It's not because it's not, a viable entity or a viable stock. It's because it's too closely held and it can be manipulated too easily, as we I think may have seen. So I think one of the real concerns for some people is the ability for price manipulation because of the concentration of ownership. I think there are others that look at it from the standpoint of, is there any there? There have been a lot of announcements of relationships with big financial institutions, but have we actually seen any actual progress in usage and adoption? I think Brad and others would say, yes, we have. I think there are others that I listen to and talk to that say, well, we really haven't. So, I think there are camps. And one other thing, and I think this is interesting, and I'm spitballing a little bit here as you give me the question live. I do think there's an element of anytime there is a tribe, I'm going to use that word intentionally. Anytime there's a tribe, and tribes, I'm meaning that not in the sense of like a Native American tribe or an indigenous tribe. I mean a newly formed tribe where it's not quite a religion, right? Because people do ask questions, and they just don't blindly follow something. But it's a, hey, I'm in this tribe, and therefore I'm validated because I'm a member of the tribe, and therefore I'll believe and I'll agree with anything that the tribe says. I think that elicits from other people who aren't in the tribe some negative feelings. And so I think Bitcoin maximalists have a little bit of that issue. I think, XRP has, Ripple people have a little bit of that issue. I think there's some of that around some of the, other projects that have come on, like EOS and other things like that. So that's a theory. I'm thinking about it as I say it out loud, but that's a theory.
I'll tell you, I've never been one for tribalism. I've never held any one particular flag, and I never will. I try to be open-minded enough to say, okay, listen, these assets are nothing more than tools. Right. And what are these tools going to be applied to? Yep. And when I looked at Bitcoin, I thought, this is an incredible trust machine. This is truth,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You can't argue with that.
Nope.
The store of value use case that seems to be kind of the drum that's being drummed over the last 8 months or so. I can totally see, and I can totally get behind that. I think
Yep.
it can be an anchoring point for other forms of value.
Right.
You know, and I totally get that. But when I look at the payments use case, the speed, efficiency, cost of the XRP ledger is unparalleled. And I can only answer one of your points, and that is the adoption and use case. Since October of 18, the actual product, which they call on-demand liquidity, is being used, and there are verifiable metrics that substantiate that adoption is increasing in volume. Bitso, the exchange, not BitMEX, Bitstamp. There is the guys over in Australia. You got Coins PH that Dan Moorhead used to own and sold. They're rocking and rolling. All these liquidity metrics are increasing substantially on a weekly basis. So from a use case perspective, hitting payments and being efficient in that, there doesn't seem to be a competitor in the field that I'm aware of that even comes close. And that's why I asked the question, because I'm just thinking logically, you know, all that other stuff aside, I don't get involved in all that. You know what I mean? It's just
that's a great perspective, and one that I'll dive into a little bit. You know, we have been more focused in our work on the Lightning Network as a potential payments rail. Just funded a company related to that. But I will definitely explore that a little more. You know, I have some good contacts from that world, people who have worked for that, you know, group in the past. And so I'll explore that a little bit, because look, we're so early. This is the part that I find just so amazing, right? Is you know, people say, oh, this is the end, it's over. I'm like, it's not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end.
right.
It may be the end of the beginning, maybe, you know, to quote Churchill, but we're so far from even the middle of the game. And if you think about money, right? What is money? It is a store of value. It's a medium of exchange. But do you use money every day? Do I use money every day? Well, depends how you define it. Do I use paper currency every day? Nope. I don't even carry paper currency anymore. In fact, I'm constantly apologizing because I can't tip somebody because I don't have paper currency anymore. And I need them to have a Venmo account or something. So that's interesting to me, that money has changed in the way I think about it. And, you know, Visa, everybody says, oh, well, Bitcoin can't match Visa and MasterCard processing speeds, nor should it try, right? Visa and MasterCard don't actually exchange money, right? What do? They keep a batch of a whole bunch of transactions, and once a month they do a money transaction. I pay them money, and then they take a piece. But I don't pay them every day or every minute I use my Visa card. So that's a payment rail. And, you know, all of the fintech payment rails that have been created, whether it's PayPal or whether it's Square, or any of these things, those are great innovations. Can they cross over into the digital age and the crypto world? We'll see. Or is it going to be something like XRP and one of their products? Or is it going to be something on Lightning Network? Or is it something that really hasn't been developed yet?
Right.
And you know, because if you go back 45 years, I think that's the right number, there were roughly 85-ish protocols around the internet. And the internet at that time, you know, was 3 sites, you know, the government and DARPA and all that stuff. And, you know, this guy, Vint Cerf, created this thing called TCP/IP. And it took from 1974 to 1991. Think about that. 17 years before the World Wide Web was invented by Tim Berners-Lee, who wrote the first web page using TCP/IP. And now we have 1.7 billion web pages or something like that from one in 1991. And, you know, Tim Berners-Lee, interestingly enough, did not become a wealthy guy, right? He invented arguably the internet or the World Wide Web, but that protocol stack went from 85 to today 5. There's basically TCP/IP at the bottom. There's HTTP for the internet. There's SMTP for email. There's FTP for file transfer, and there's www for web pages. So are we going to experience that same kind of protocol stack in Web 3.0? Yeah, I actually think we will. And somebody is going to find a way to exploit that stack. And is it going to be Bitcoin at the bottom and Ethereum next layer and Polkadot at the next layer and Filecoin? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not really that techie and it's enough to be dangerous. But I do know that there is potentially a massive opportunity for the disruptive force that figures out how to be the payment rail for crypto that allows Bitcoin to stay Bitcoin, which is the most secure, no fraudulent transactions in 11 years. Think about that. Hundreds of millions of transactions, not one fraudulent transaction, never been hacked, never been compromised, been up 99.999% of the time. Amazing. But I would say it's like building a house. When you build a house, you can have good, fast, or cheap. Pick two, right? You can have a good and fast and it won't be cheap. You can have a good and cheap and it won't be fast. You can have a fast and good, and whatever the third one is. And here you only get two. You get fast or secure. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but I ask people all the time, how many times have you had to get a new Visa or MasterCard number because of fraud? Me, twice in the last couple of years. It happens all the time. They get attacked 30,000 times a day. How do I know that number? Because my son was their auditor for a while. 30,000 times a day. And their security is good, actually great, but it's not perfect. And Bitcoin's security is perfect because it's slow. And so I don't want Bitcoin to be a payment rail. I want things to build on top of it, whether that's XRP, whether that's Lightning, whether that's something else. I don't know. I'm open, like your point. Why anyone would say definitively, well, this is not going to work and therefore I'm going to ignore it. That just doesn't make any sense how early you are in the game.
Let me ask you this. Now, if you don't know the answer, that's cool. I don't know the answer, but this, so when I look at something, you call it due diligence, research, whatever you want to call it. When I was looking into Bitcoin, it checked a ton of incredible boxes. Okay, check, check, check. Then the only box it didn't check, and I can't get a good answer from anybody, is what happens once all the Bitcoins are mined? Yeah. What's the incentive to keep that system secure? I can't get an answer.
The only answer I have, and I don't know that it's right, but I believe it's right, is transaction fees that will shift from miner rewards to transaction fees. And I'm okay with that, right? You know, the whole thing today is, okay, to transfer money across international borders costs, you know, roughly 12%. Western Union. Why? Well, because, you know, there's a treaty with the Rothschilds and gotta, you know, pay the BIS and Standard Charter or whatever.
Oh, Mark, does that come with Vaseline?
Yeah, exactly. And if I wanted to send you a Bitcoin right now, live, I could do it for free. Now, free is the wrong number, right? Free is the wrong number. I'm not saying that transaction fees are negative. Now, if transaction fees go to 12%, well, then what did we really do? We just displaced one bad actor for another bad actor. Right. I don't think that'll happen. I think what'll happen is the difficulty rate will adjust. Some of the miners will go bust, and that's okay, because we don't need infinite miners to keep the network secure. We need some level of mining. And the miners will find a way to charge, I believe, transaction fees to stay incented to, and there'll also be technological improvements, right? There already have been. We have faster ASICs, better ASICs. Right. And who knows, maybe the quantum computer will be created and then we have to have a quantum killer. And you know, the one thing I love about this space is it's pushing us to, better energy efficiency. We're now recapturing, latent energy that we used to go unused in hydro and photovoltaic. One of my favorites is in the Permian Basin in Texas. We were producing so much oil and there's associated gas and they don't have pipelines. So what are they doing? They're just flaring it. That's super bad for the environment, super expensive. So what can you do? You plop down a micro turbine and a Bitcoin miner. Now you take that natural gas, you burn it cleanly and efficiently, and you generate a store of energy and a store of value. How beautiful is that? Saving the planet and converting energy into value. And that's one of the things that I just find so annoying about, again, I call it, the FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Oh, proof of work is so energy inefficient. No, it's not compared to the alternative. The banking industry, way more inefficient. Think of all the bank branches that sit around empty all day, generating or using power. Think about all the armored cars transferring money back and forth. Think about their computer networks and the data centers and all the stuff that's using massive amounts of energy. I saw one estimate that it's like 2,000 times more than Bitcoin to use the banking system.
Right.
And yet we don't think about and realize that as we push the boundary of this, everything we do in the world, I believe, is converting hydrocarbon to energy, right? And that energy then converts into value. And if you think about it, you and I are using electricity right now. Hopefully we're creating value by giving people intellectual capital or intellectual knowledge that they can use to make good decisions, to add value in another way. Every day I get up and I do my job. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to invest capital to make people more capital so they can do more good in the world, and every job is about that, right? How do we get to work? How do we keep the lights on? How do we make widgets? All of it is a conversion of energy into value. And one of the things I love about Bitcoin is it's the perfect, I think, conversion of energy into value that is instantaneously transportable, ultimately divisible or infinitely divisible. Well, maybe not infinitely, but 100, million Satoshis. But so I love the fact that technology is being advanced. I love the fact that there are doubting Thomases, because that means there's more opportunity for those of us who adopt early. In fact, that's my pinned tweet, right? The greatest wealth is always created by believing in something and investing in it long before people even understand.
Agreed. And that thesis, your thesis right there, or your principle that you're quoting, that's exactly what I did. Yeah. I got out of the game at 50 years old, got into crypto at 52.
Awesome.
Within 6 months of learning about this, I had 100% of what I had in my equity positions, my stuff. I've sold everything. I have 400 pounds worth of stuff. I put myself on a $350 a month budget down here in Costa Rica, and the entire nut is in this well, I have a little in Bitcoin, but for the most part, it's XRP, because I believe that it's got the legs.
Wow. That's a great story. I love that story. That's awesome.
But I'll tell you, you want to hear, I have two things to tell you. Want to hear what Raul said yesterday about this exact question? When I asked him about, why are all these people
absolutely
invested, yet they don't talk about it? And he said, Jerry, this is so big and so enormous that if the messaging isn't on point for the entry, which Bitcoin is the entry, then you'll lose people. Now I'm paraphrasing, but that wasn't, his 5-minute explanation basically boiled down to, you folks that are already here, you know, and some of you are experts and you still don't know everything. That's how monstrous this is. So to try to disseminate this to the masses is too much to handle. And then the light bulb went off. I went, okay, this Mark Yusko guy, this Novogratz guy, this Dan Moorhead guy, Barry Silbert, they're not against any of these things.
Yeah.
They keep talking about Bitcoin specifically because we have to get somebody to understand the basic fundamentals of blockchain before we can start rolling out these idiosyncratic specialty items. And it makes all the sense. So in other words, you're not a bad guy.
No, I appreciate that. It's all about infrastructure, right? And look, I made so many mistakes. You know, I was about the same age, so I'm about to turn 57. So I was 51 6 years ago when Dan Moorhead called and said, "Hey, come to San Francisco. I want to talk." And I went out there and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "Look, I'm shutting down the hedge fund." And we had invested in his hedge fund 14 years ago to seed it when he spun out of Tiger. Again, back to Julian. Everything in my life goes back to Julian. Not everything, but a lot of my life goes back there. And I said, "Why would you do that? Why would you give back $1 billion?" He says, "Look, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my career to blockchain technology and this thing called Bitcoin." And he also is invested in Ripple. And I'm like, "Well, okay, well, what do you mean?" And he says, "Well, here's what it is." And look, I immediately got picks and shovels, right? I'm a picks and shovels guy. I've been investing in infrastructure my whole life, made lots of money on cellular infrastructure and internet infrastructure and mobile net infrastructure, you know, done really well in those markets. So I immediately got picks and shovels. Now, that was the first of my many bad decisions because he was starting a Bitcoin fund and an infrastructure fund. And that infrastructure fund's up 11x. No one's complaining. Did some of the first exchanges, did Ripple, and that's great. No one should complain about 11 times your money. But I should have put the money in the Bitcoin fund. But at the time, I was not dealing drugs on Silk Road. I was not a cryptography student. I didn't get it. I didn't spend the time. I didn't go down the rabbit hole because I had a job. And I mean, I shouldn't just say I didn't take the time. I didn't make the time, right? It's like exercise. I didn't make the time. You don't find the time to exercise. You make the time to exercise. So a year later, I wrote about it, and you know, it was $500. And I had clients call up and say, "Look, we'll fire you. Stop talking about magic internet money. That's stupid. It's never going to be anything." I'm like, wow. It's a violent response to a seemingly innocuous, you know, one paragraph in a 40-page letter. And, you know, another year goes by. I try to convince my son to go into the business. And he's like, I don't know, Dad. I think I'm just going to go, you know, out to San Francisco, work for KPMG. We get a chuckle out of it. He's like, "Yeah, okay, Dad, you're right. I should have gone to work for Coinbase. But you're not as smart as you think you are." I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" And he said, "Well, you didn't lever up and buy Bitcoin." I'm like, "Okay, fair. In fact, he was saying, you didn't put everything in Bitcoin, and or Ripple or whatever, I mean XRP or whatever it was."
Sure.
And you know, good news, he's working for a company called Snowflake. They're going to rule the world someday. It's amazing. He's done okay, and he's probably going to do better than his dad. So now here we are. 2 years ago, I finally said, "Okay, now I get it." And there was a lot of reticence because I wasn't a young guy. I'm not a tech guy. People were like, "Why is this old guy trying to cross over into our space, our world?" And I said, "Well, because I get it. It's technological innovation, and it's following this 14-year cycle I talk about all the time, from the mainframe in 54 to the microchip in 68, the personal computer in 82, to the internet in 96, to the mobile net in 2010, and the trust net." Back to your comments, Jerry. You know, this is the source of truth. This is the trust net in 2024, when everything is connected and we need a single source of truth and triple entry accounting. All of that's going to happen. And I decided to go kind of all in. And now I haven't moved to Costa Rica, which maybe I should. But you know, I have started an entity called Morgan Creek Digital. I got a couple partners. We raised a venture fund, and you know, we're doing all the things that we think can put us in a place to benefit as this ecosystem evolves.
Well, I want to let you know that if you ever want to reach out and talk about Ripple, what's going on, what do I see as the fundamentals, what's real, you know, separated from all the noise, because there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to be a resource for you in that department.
I appreciate that. I'll do it. Take you up on
I
it.
also want to follow one of the principles that I try to live my life by, and it's called respect. And I look at the clock and I see we don't have that much time left together. And there's something that I really, really am curious about, because I've heard, and there's plenty of times you've talked about the first chapter of your life. You've talked about the second chapter of your life. But what I'm curious about, as you sit here now, being the designer and the architect of what's to come, what is going to be chapter 3 for Mark Yusko?
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate it. So I talk about this. So chapter 1 is I work for not-for-profits. Chapter 2, I built Morgan Creek as an asset management firm, traditional asset management firm. Chapter 3 is building this blockchain oriented, crypto oriented business, helping to educate and proselytize the fundamental technological evolution, the financial natural selection, as I call it. And then chapter 4 is I'll probably go teach. So I'm really enjoying chapter 3. I hope it goes a couple decades, and then I can go do chapter 4. But the last couple years have been fantastic. I really am energized every day to get up and talk to really smart people. I learned 2 things in investing. One is you follow the money, you follow the smart money. The second is you follow the talent, and talent has migrated in my career. And I got a long career. I got white hair to prove it. Only twice, right? In the early 90s, I saw a migration of talent to this thing called the internet. And there's the great clip, Bryant Gumbel and Katie Couric on Today Show. What is internet? And it turned out to be a pretty big thing. And they didn't get it. And nobody got why people were going into the internet. And, when they started companies like Google, people were like, I don't understand that. Or Netflix, when it first started, it was a horrible company, horrible business, right? The discs broke in the mail. They got lost. Video on demand didn't work because dial-up modems weren't fast enough. So we needed more infrastructure. And so all the things that made it seem like a bad decision to leave Wall Street, to leave consulting, to leave iBanking, to leave technology companies or industrial companies to go work in this crazy area of venture capital and the internet was awesome. And if you follow the talent and invest in the talent, you made tons of money. And I think the same thing's happening today. Some of the smartest people I've ever met, you talk about Novo and others, are leaving really good positions, good jobs, good, parts of their lives, their chapter 1s and 2s and 3s, and they're going into this new chapter. And I wake up every morning excited about what I do, right? The whole thing, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. That's how I feel, blessed in that way. And I get to have these great conversations. And what's cool about them, I used to have these conversations a lot, but they weren't recorded. Now having conversations like this recorded, they can be shared, and then I can actually go back and review and listen to again and hear what I thought a year ago or 2 years ago or last week. Very, very valuable. And just having an open dialogue and thinking about big picture ideas is valuable in plotting out the paragraphs of the chapter that's ahead.
Well, I, for one, am here to tell you, I think you are an incredible teacher. And if you were to focus your time on it, it's mind-boggling to think the impact that you can have on others. You have a way of communicating that is obviously articulate, thought out, intelligent, but also understandable, common, and very relaxed. Yet there's a strength and confidence in what you're talking about. I think you're one of the kind of guys that has very strong opinions that are weakly held. In other words, you're willing.
My favorite quote, right? In fact,
I got that from another guest, actually.
Oh, 2 things. One, I'm incredibly grateful for that compliment. That means a lot to me, because look, the best thing that can happen when you're given the privilege to share your information with others is that you communicate effectively. And there's no higher compliment than to say that you communicate effectively and at the right level. So I really do appreciate that. That means a lot. In fact, one of the coolest things that ever happened to me when I was speaking is I was giving a talk a couple of years ago, and And the photographer literally put her camera down and sat down and listened to my presentation and came up to me afterwards and said, look, I've shot hundreds of presentations, never done that before, never had interest. And I just really appreciate you speaking to my level, not in jargon, not trying to impress, but to speak, to educate, to help. And that just, made my day, actually made my year. And to that point, the strong opinions loosely held. So my wife has only seen me speak one time. She came to a conference that I was at out in Vegas, and it was bad anyway. But she came, and we were on our way to California to see our kids, and she came, and at the end, she was horrified, and she said, "Mark, you can't say things like that." I'm like what? She says, "You say things so forcefully." I'm like, well, what's wrong with that? She says, well, people will believe you. I'm like, well, kind of the idea. And she says, but what if you're wrong? I'm like, I'm wrong all the time. I changed my mind, right? And it's the famous story of Lord Keynes. He was giving a speech. Someone was in the front row, gave a speech, and a week later, same guy in the front row, and he changed one of his positions. And the guy stood up and said, Lord Keynes, last week you said the exact opposite. He says, well, sir, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do? And look, I believe that if you are given the privilege to speak, you should share things that make the listener, feel like they got value. So I'm going to say things right or wrong, but I'm going to say things that I believe and I'm passionate about. 2, I'm going to try to communicate them in a way that's accessible and that encourages debate and dialogue. In fact, one of the things I love to do, I shouldn't say this on the air, but I actually like to, after I give a talk, I like to go in the restroom, close myself in a stall, and listen to what people say. And what I love to hear is someone come in and say, geez, that guy is just full of shit. And I'm like, why would you want to hear it? I'm like, because at first they're like, that guy's full of shit. Then they're like, well, maybe he's not completely wrong. Well, what if he is right? Well, maybe I should talk about it. Maybe I should think about it. Maybe I should talk to him about it. Maybe I should talk to my friend about it. Maybe I should talk to my wife about it. That's the whole point, to encourage dialogue, debate, discourse. That's the whole purpose of speaking, educating. And so that's a long-winded way of saying, I really appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the nice comment. And I really do feel privileged and blessed to have these opportunities.
Well, it was definitely an honor for me to have you. And I hope that, I hope I've impacted upon you the opportunity to collaborate with you again in the future, maybe someday reach out, because I am always looking for quote unquote mentors. They don't need to have a badge or an official title, but there are people that I look up to, I want to learn things from. And one of the only ways to do that is to observe and then feedback.
Yep.
And so if I have your permission to feed back to you through, email or whatever in the future, I would really appreciate that opportunity.
That's great. I appreciate we have the relationship. We'll continue it. And look, feedback is the best. Constructive criticism is the best. And what drives me crazy is when people won't give me negative feedback. I'm like, why? No, don't hurt your feelings, or that's what I live for, right? I need positive feedback. I need negative feedback. I need constructive criticism. I need real criticism, right? Think I'm doing something wrong? Tell me.
Well, isn't that how it worked when we were kids? You were talking about this new generation of participatory trophy kids. When I was growing up, the negative feedback I got was when I was starting to put my finger in a socket, my mom would slap my hand.
Exactly.
Negative feedback loop that is something not to do.
Yep.
Look, now you get Child Protective Services called on you.
Amen.
Well, I mean,
Amen.
I'm exaggerating, but you understand the point.
I do. I know exactly what you're saying.
All
Well,
right.
Jared, I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate all the work you did to put it together, and I hope people enjoy it as much as I have enjoyed having it.
You're the man, Mark. Thank you very much. And for all of you folks, thanks for tuning into One-on-One with Jerry Hall. Until next time, Pura Vida.